Hi, in this video we'll be showing a researcher managing a multi-experiment pipeline and especially how they can understand the dependencies between these models. So as you could see in the previous videos, there are two kinds of inputs. There's either an independent input or a dependent input. In this small example you can see a pipeline consisting of three models, model A, B and C. The very first model takes some input that is simply just found on the desktop. It doesn't depend on any other models, so it's independent. But the model A also outputs something, and that output is directly used as input in model B, making this output an independent input from model B coming from model A. And that dependency chain can basically be infinitely long and involve multiple different models. In this example, we just have clean linear where model B then outputs something new, and that is as well used as dependent input for model C. But they can also have additional, for example, they can both have a lot of dependent inputs but also independent inputs as well. Let's see how this looks like in Traceback. So in this example, we have these 4 experiments, and in the end we're going to make an ice cream dessert. So let's look at the last model, what is necessary to make an ice cream dessert. We can see we have this independent input of a plate, but now we also have 2 colored input sections being green and blue. That is because they are dependent inputs and they come from the colored model, meaning the blue ice cream comes from this churner model. We can see in the output section it will have one called ice cream. The same thing for this green one. We can drag it back to the chopping machine and we can see that the topping is an output from that. So even if we had the full pipeline and we were unsure how to reach the end goal, we could basically start from the end goal and trace back to the very first experiment. By the way, you can also manually choose these colors. For example, if you imagine the blender to be yellow colored, you can just go to menu and change these colors. And notice it's not only the model that gets colored, it is also the dependent input that relies on this model. So let's make some runs. So we can see from the very first one we need a flavor profile. So let's select something from the blender, brown sugar, we need some caramel, and let's save this great profile. And we can now see we have this run within this single solo experiment, but also as inputs to the next model we have the list of runs, because they depend not only on the specific single file in here, but also how the file was actually given birth, meaning all the dependent or independent inputs in the other model. And now we can continue to run this solo experiment. Now we have this flavor profile. And we could basically continue this process and we can see how now we have this ice cream. Now we need the toppings. Where do we get that? From the chopping machine, and we can just continue this. This is the simple way to understand dependencies throughout Traceback using minimal obstruction, simply having colors and no interlacing lines.